whatever you were gonna do. Cause it's time for Nick and the crew to tell you all the lore that you never knew about your favorite media, my dude. Stuff you're too lazy to look up. Nick and the boys gonna hook you up. From Halo and Batman to religious stuff. Lorecast is starting, so shut the hell up. I guess this is the part where I start.
Yeah.
I'm a professional podcaster.
Yes, you are.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lorecast. My name is Devin. I'm hanging out with my friend Zach. We are the Beetlecast crew. And Nick gave me permission to come in here and basically shit up for an episode and talk about something that we find really awesome, which is Mortal Kombat lore. We're going to talk about Mortal Kombat today. We're going to take over. You know, you might have noticed that earlier when I said it was beeped. The reason is because Nick tells me again and again and again and again to watch my mouth and stop cussing. The audience of Lorecast has delicate ears and they cannot handle bad fucking language. So you're going to hear a lot of beeps during this. Just get used to it. If that's an issue, I strongly suggest you listen to Beetlecast, where we don't beep out the fucks and the shits and the bitch ass motherfucking all right? We don't do any of it. All right? I'm so sorry.
So is this going to be exclusive content for our Patreon users?
Oh my god, we really do need to do a Patreon for Beetlecast. That would be excellent. Okay, so today we are going to talk about the lore behind the franchise Mortal Kombat. We're going to go into the video games. We're going to go into the abominations known as the movies. And then we're going to talk a little bit about where we think it's going to go in the future, because Mortal Kombat has interestingly been a franchise that most franchises don't evolve. Like if you think about Jason or you think about any of that stuff, like even like Jurassic Park, they don't really evolve that much. They kind of just stay in the same place and get really self-referential, which Mortal Kombat does as well.
Oh yeah.
But mechanics wise and like as far as just how advanced it is and like the minor details that maybe most people don't pay attention to, Mortal Kombat gets better and better and better, and that's why you see a strong competitive tournament aspect to it these days, because there's a science behind Mortal Kombat, which Zach is going to get into because he knows about it. I only know what Zach's told me, and barely even at that. I'm just kind of sitting here like, that sounds really cool, bro. I have no clue what you're talking about, but cool. It's awesome. Turtling. So Zach, do you want to lead us off with a little bit of the history of the franchise of Mortal Kombat?
So are we looking at the history of like the game itself, or are you talking about the history of the like story, like in-game story? Because like I can go off for either one.
Let's start with the game itself. Let's start before. Was it Tipper Gore? Did Tipper Gore do the ESRB, or was that the music one that did? I think
Tipper Gore was music. Joseph Lieberman, I believe, was the one for the ESRB. Okay.
All right. So before Joseph Lieberman got his panties in a wad, this is where this starts.
All right. So back in the arcade days, there was like one seminal fighting game, really, and that was Street Fighter. Like Street Fighter is one that pretty much everybody knows. Capcom, Japanese developed game. Two absolute mad lads, John Tobias and Ed Boon, decided with Midway in order to try and make a game. Now, originally, the game was going to feature Jean-Claude Van Damme, and it was going to be a very Bloodsport style game, where in which he had like different towers that you fought against, things of that sort. Jean-Claude didn't actually like the way that the game was coming out and pulled his licensing from it. And because of that, that's how we got Johnny Cage as a character. But because they pulled that, they wanted to not like get rid of the resources that they had and everything that they did for the game. So they pivoted it into turning it into what we now know as Mortal Kombat. And they wanted a little bit of shock factor because like there was no like real guides on how to do fatalities back in the time when the game came out. There like people just had to try and figure out like how to do things, because in the arcade it gave you like a rudimentary move set on the actual like bottom end of the arcade cab. You got to see the characters and names and like a couple of moves, and that was it. Like when you got to the fatality screen, nobody really knew how to do it, and then people just kind of like start figuring it out. And they gave a little bit of information to the arcade heads or the people who own the arcades in order to like pass it along a little bit in order to get it to become like a myth of how to do these types of things. When it came to Mortal Kombat 1, because of the shock of like seeing pixelated gore in the way that they did, and this was also during the same time that like games like Night Trap, which when you look back on it, really shouldn't have been as big of a deal as it was, but back then, ooh, video games only for children, ooh, protect the kids. Um, it ended up causing quite a bit of a fervor, and kids ate it up, and it was definitely the best move that Midway could have possibly done at that time, because some of their sales were sinking. They had NBA Jam and some other stuff, but not a lot of like big franchises in order to go after, and Mortal Kombat became theirs. That became the West seminal fighting game, and also Midway's like cash cow, which is part of the reason why we saw so many sequels and so many things so quickly from the franchise.
Another interesting feature of Mortal Kombat that should be recognized as the interesting thing that it was. I don't think it was the first one to do this, but it was still very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Was that they used photographs of actual actors and
Yeah.
actresses in order to portray the people. So part of that fervor and part of people being angry about it was that they were clearly real people,
Mm-hmm.
and so that kind of violence being done against real people at your fingertips, at your control, is was something that kind of contributed to it becoming as legendary as it was set up to be. So please continue.
Yeah. So because of like the kind of runaway success that the game ended up being, Mortal Kombat 2 came out, and that was we ended up in Mortal Kombat 2 we ended up getting the primary antagonist of the franchise. Now we have Shao Kahn, because the first one was Shang Tsung. I know this is kind of like bouncing around a little bit, but there's a point here. So with Shang Tsung, he was kind of like, oh, creepy shape shifting enemy, but also we ended up getting a couple of different characters out of that, like Reptile and Ermac. I think Ermac was from the first because of an error code that would show up depending on what was in the coding for the game. But anyway, but now we have Shao Kahn, who is the big bad. He's big, he's frustrating as all hell. He's bad.
You will die.
You suck. Yeah.
You suck. That dude, that's my favorite. That is my favorite. And when I was playing against him in the new Mortal Kombat, in 11 or whatever, and he said that, he was like, "You suck." I was like, because I remember in Shaolin Monks when the statue is chasing you, and it's like the Shao Kahn statue is like, "It's official. You suck."
Which I will say that like I love Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks for the simple fact that they just kind of went to the absolute walls with it, and they decided to throw like they decided to throw language everywhere in it. And I know they're like they don't necessarily like it, but like Scorpion, the level of intensity of Ed Boon, who does the voice of Scorpion in almost every game.
And in the movie.
Yeah, and in the movie. And him just saying, "Get over here, bitch," was just,
dude.
Oh, okay.
But that game sucked for one reason, and it was because of Shao Kahn's hammer. Okay, dude, it took me. I don't have patience like that anymore. Like I tried at least 100 times to beat Shao Kahn because he would do the spinning hammer move at the end of the game, and it was like 2-hit KO. Like you were out. And you had to like time it perfectly, and it was random, and then he would taunt you, and like it's just like what a
And if you were in the arcades, then you had that pressure of just like, I only have this much money, and there's like 3 people behind me waiting in order to play this game. Sweats. Just big
but
sweats.
I don't have any money, Midway. Okay, so Mortal Kombat 2 and Mortal Kombat 2, of course, the debut of a lot of famous characters that have stayed with the franchise since then. Baraka being an excellent example, Shao Kahn, of course. And then another thing that needs to be noted about the history of it was actually that Midway and the team behind Mortal Kombat attempted to kind of work with consoles to make it so it could come to consoles. I think they saw the potential, and so they conceded. And in that way, Super Nintendo, if you have a copy of Mortal Kombat 1 on Super Nintendo, the fighters sweat
Mm-hmm.
instead of blood, and they do not have fatalities. And then in Mortal Kombat 1 for Sega Genesis, I'm going to say a string of letters and enter it into Mortal Kombat 1 on Sega Genesis, and you will get the blood code, which is ABACABB. I think it's like ACAB or something like
Yeah,
that. And
something along those lines.
you'll you enter it during the part where it's like talking about codes, like it's talking about like it's actually doing like text about like moral codes or something. And you wrote it in, you hear Scorpion go, "Get over here," and it's like, all right,
We
now it's happening.
we're
But
in
I
there.
was lame. Yeah, we're in there, but I was lame. So the only fatality I even knew was on the bridge where you uppercut somebody and then they go
Stage
into the
fatality.
pit. Yeah, the stage fatality. I still to this day have only pulled off accidentally, like the ripping their skull off and their
Mm-hmm.
spines hanging there, like once. And in modern day Mortal Kombat, you can just like they have a menu where you can just go like look it up and like try it out and see how it
Mm-hmm.
works. Um, I do that often. Actually, in Mortal Kombat 11, before we get back into it, this is a little bit scattered, guys, but please remember we're the guys from Beetlecast, so this is how we rock and roll. We're very stream of consciousness. Um, what is your favorite friendship from Mortal Kombat 11? Because in my mind, there's only one option.
That's hard. I would say it is a hard tie between RoboCop and his robot dance and Raiden and Kid Thunder.
Dude, yes! Dude, Raiden, man! Boom!
Yeah.
Dude, I died. He was the first one I did a friendship
Mm-hmm.
with, and the only problem with it was that it was so good that when I did other friendships, they weren't as good. Like, Shao Kahn, he does the hammer thing, and it just like it goes up and it's like,
Have
Um,
you done Jax's though?
I don't think I've done Jax's. What's Jax's?
Jax has the sexy sax man, but it uses part of the MK like sound at the end of it.
No way.
He
I
puts
haven't
on he
done
puts
that.
on the sunglasses, grabs the saxophone, starts playing, and then at the end of it.
That is amazing. They really up their games. The new Mortal Kombat games, 10 and 11 specifically, have like such a variation of finishing moves you can do. And there's one actually that Braylon used to do on me all the time because Braylon's a much better Mortal Kombat player than I am. And
Mhm,
at parties and stuff, we would have a few drinks or whatever, and then we'd play, and I would lose usually to Braylon.
mhm.
And he did this thing that used to annoy me so hard. I think this was on 10. This was before 11 came out. And what it was basically he would give me a pass and it would resurrect me and he would kick my ass all over again.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah. And on 11, you have mercies, where in which like you, in order to do the mercy, you look like you're teabagging the person from a distance.
like it's insane, man. So those guys are really innovative. So after Mortal Kombat 2 came out and kind of like everything like really popped off, then you had Mortal Kombat 3. Now, Mortal Kombat 3 was really the last of the straight 2D Mortal Kombats.
Mm-hmm.
And that also introduced a lot of new characters, especially as playable characters. Like I believe Shiva was introduced
Mm-hmm.
in Mortal Kombat
And
3.
the omission of one very very important person on Mortal Kombat 3 Vanilla.
I don't know what.
All right,
Was it
so
Baraka? Because Baraka should have
no,
been in every Mortal Kombat
Scorpion.
game. Scorpion was. Oh my god,
In the
Scorpion was.
vanilla version of Mortal Kombat, because the one that you're probably thinking of is Mortal Kombat Trilogy. The Mortal Kombat 3, the vanilla version, Scorpion was, if I'm remembering correctly, Scorpion was not in it.
I didn't have
Um,
trilogy. I had 3. I had
oh, you had
Vanilla
3?
3.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe if memory serves, it was Scorpion that wasn't in it. Like, there's a 40% chance it could be Sub Zero, and if I got that wrong, I do apologize to everybody. But I feel like it is Scorpion
No,
that was
it's in
missing
Mortal
there.
Kombat 3. Sub Zero is Sub Zero's brother, so he's the
Right,
one. He's the one that has
Baihan. Yeah,
the yeah.
Baihan died, and then it was his brother. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that was 3. The guy with the scar on his,
Yeah,
who I believe to this day is still counted as the canonical Sub
he
Zero,
is.
and then the old one became Noob Saibot.
Yes,
So that's
which
kind of
is Ed Boon's name. Ed Boon's and Tobias's name backwards.
backwards. Yep.
Mhm.
And Noob Saibot actually was pretty lame back in the day, but they've turned him into something really like
An
especially
edge
like
lord.
he is, but in 11 he's awesome. Like he walks up to you and he has a big ass scythe that he just pulls out of himself and he's
Mhm.
like, "You're dead, mother." He doesn't really say that, but that's kind of the idea because he's like so dark and like creepy. He looks like the Grim Reaper. He's freaking dope. Although I do think it's really weird that when he beats you in a round,
Mhm.
the shadow goes behind him and then lifts him up. And I'm like, all I can think is like of Titanic.
Titanic.
Like that's all like he just lifts him up. And I'm just like, bro, like that is a very, very ugly version of Kate Winslet. But all right, that
Mhm.
works for me. Whatever makes Nether Realms happy. So after that, and I'm just taking over this timeline a little bit,
Mhm.
but it's okay because I actually am pretty familiar with a little bit of this. So Mortal Kombat 3 was great, and then interestingly, Mortal Kombat 4 was when they finally took the delve into full 3D. Now, something you might notice about more recent Mortal Kombat games is that they're 3D, but they're on a 2D plane, right? So you can interact
2.5D. Mhm.
2.5D, so you can interact with some of the stuff, but for the most part, it stays sideways, no big deal. But Mortal Kombat 4 was actually in a fully 3D plane, so you could interact with each other. You had to press a button in order to kind of skip over and skip over and skip over. Mortal Kombat 4 had fully polygon characters, so it wasn't anywhere close to fully realistic, but that was because it was released on software like the N64. So like if you think about Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, it's just kind of right, it slots in right in with the style
Mhm.
of what happened during that era. Today it looks pretty atrocious. But back then, for kids like me, it was the shit. I had it on N64. I thought it was the greatest thing in history, and Goro was in it, and Goro is an excellent character. And then it was just wonderful, but they kind of didn't stick with that. They kind of
Yeah.
moved back to 2.5D. I don't know
Well,
if it was programming reasons or complications, but I did like a lot of the stage stuff you could do against your opponent in 4. I thought that was really cool.
so it took a little while for them to get back to a proper 2.5D because Mortal Kombat 4 had a little bit of like it was 3D, but it was 3D in certain aspects. Like when you did certain moves, it would end up changing, moving the arena around, or if you ended up pulling out weapons, it ended up causing the arena to change a little bit. It took until Mortal Kombat 9 in order to get back to proper 2.5D, or at the time 2.5D. But like then we had the what was known as the Dark Ages of Mortal Kombat, which like to some people it definitely was not. It was definitely like their childhood and the time period that they really got into Mortal Kombat. But to a lot of the like harder core fans, that was the Dark Ages. Mortal Kombat, Deadly Alliance, Deception, Armageddon.
Bro, you will not diss Deception or fucking Armageddon in my
Hold on,
presence. You will not. This
hold on,
You're about to get
hold on.
fired from Beetlecast. Deception was the shit. Onaga was
Hold on, hold
wonderful.
on. Now, keep in mind, I said to certain fans, out of the 3D games, Deception was honestly the best one, and I loved Deception just because of like the aesthetic that they had, some of the characters that they added, even though a couple of them were entirely pointless. Looking at you, everybody from the Chaos Realm, um, and there were some other like interesting ideas that decided to do it. But the game has chess combat and it has cart combat, so I cannot complain against it.
Chess combat was the shit. I loved it. I loved it. Why did they stop doing like awesome stuff like that? Like cart combat was fun too. They were like little chibi guys with big
Mm-hmm.
heads. And this dude, that was like that. I don't know how you can possibly Armageddon. Armageddon. I had it on PlayStation 2. And Armageddon featured, and we talked about this before we started streaming. Armageddon or whatever.
Recording, yeah.
Recording, yeah. It featured every character in the Mortal Kombat because
Mythos, yeah.
because they hadn't started doing the guest characters. That wouldn't come until really 9, but um and Armageddon included the most important character in the history of Mortal Kombat, the unsung hero of the entire franchise. I am, of course, talking about the one, the only, the beautiful Mocap.
Okay, so something that's real fun. Like I love the fact that Mocap was in Deadly Alliance and then got brought back into Armageddon, and like his oh man, just his ugh, too
so
good, too
so
good.
We had me and my little brother actually played we played Mortal Kombat because we were, obviously we were brothers and we were really cool and we still are, of course. And one time I bet him. We used to play for quarters, so we would have a stack of quarters and just play. And I bet him that in Armageddon, where you could make your own character, I made a character. It was a dragon named Leet Haxors, because I thought I was smart or something. Um, he uh he was a devil dragon wearing Converse. So if that says anything about where my future went, it's kind of interesting if you're familiar with Beetle Milk. And I bet Jeffrey that I could beat him with every single character in Armageddon. And I beat him with every single character in Armageddon until Mocap. And then Mocap was the last one, and it was the last fight, and I was about to win my bet. And it was like a quarter on the line or something. And dude, he beat me because Mocap is not legendary or anything. Mocap sucks, and I have no idea. And because Mocap was a tribute to motion capture, so it was a guy in a tight suit with like the light bulbs or whatever on it.
Yeah. And actually, if we're being specific, mocap is a tribute to Carlos Pesina, the actor who played Raiden in Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and Trilogy.
Oh, that's cool. I did not know that. Learned something new. So, from there, from the Dark Ages, douche. There were some games though that are less than phenomenal. Sub-Zero Chronicles comes to mind.
Oh god, Mythology Sub-Zero.
Yeah, Mythology Sub-Zero. Yeah,
But honestly, the worst one was Special Forces.
I didn't even play it. I didn't even play it.
Okay, so that was before the quote unquote Dark Ages. That was back on the PlayStation 1. Mythology Sub-Zero and the one I just said. Those
Special
were both
Forces.
Yeah, Special Forces. Those were both PlayStation 1 titles. Special Forces was actually after Mythologies, but Mythologies worked significantly better, even as it was a platformer. When it comes to that game, oh, oh, Special Forces was one that was trying to be far too ambitious and trying to do too many things at once. And when it finally came out, because it was supposed to have been out like 4 or 5 years before it actually came out, and once it actually came out, it was bad. It was real bad. It was just not great at all. And due to that, like it kind of tanked the interest of having third party Mortal Kombat games for a while, or like at least Mortal Kombat games that were like spin-offs of the main franchise, unless we're talking about Mortal Kombat, like the Game Boy Advance versions of certain ones, where in which characters from that ended up in Armageddon, like specifically god, I can't remember her shit. I know her name. I can't remember it right now, but like it was one that had started with an S. Like she wasn't Scarlet because that was a character that was created a fair bit later. But it'll come back to me soon enough, and I'll probably end up remembering it like closer to the end of the episode. But yeah, there were some diversions that they did that ended up leading into different ways. But one of the things that I did definitely like about like that era was characters in original and also Dark Ages. Characters were just kind of made up out of things that fans like had theories of. And if we're talking about lore as a whole, that's honestly one of the most interesting parts of the Mortal Kombat lore, is that the fans had a large part in building it, because like Ermac was a character that was made because fans found an error, and they were thinking, hey, this might be a trick to unlock this particular type of character. It wasn't in the game. They're just like, and Tobias and Ed were just kind of like, yeah, sure, we'll throw him in. We'll make another ninja. We can make another power swap.
It's fascinating too, because these are like, we're talking about characters that are to this day like mainstays. Like Ermac is an incredibly important Mortal Kombat character. Like there's no way around it. So that's dope. And then we also had Shaolin monks in that time period. So I love Shaolin monks. I thought it was wonderful. It was almost an RPG, if I remember correctly. Like it was
Serena was her name. Sorry.
Damn, dude. Okay, Serena. We get it, bro. It's Serena. Do you think her name's Serena? Anyway, okay. So Serena, who I actually have no idea who he's talking about.
She
Uh,
was in Sub-Zero Mythologies, and then like made her first playable appearance in Tournament Edition for the Game Boy Advance. Anyway,
maybe you can answer a question, a burning question that actually I have, and that
mhm.
is, who is Tanya?
Tanya is a character that was made up specifically during the Mortal Kombat 4 era. She is a servant of Quan Chi and more so of I can't remember Shinnok. She has her own like plans to try and just like dominate out. I think it's Outworld or I want to say it's Outworld. Like,
Well, if she's
but
aligned with Quan Chi or Shinnok, then Outworld would make absolute sense, or maybe the
yeah,
Nether Realms.
yeah, because she's definitely not any of like the god characters. No, she's trying to take over Edenia. She's trying to take over Outworld and also Edenia because she wants to usurp power from Kitana because she absolutely despises her.
Good deal, because she's in like 10 or whatever, and me and Xanthas
Yes.
are always like, who the hell is Tanya? But okay, cool. So moving along, there was a time where there wasn't a lot of Mortal Kombat games coming out.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of quiet for a while, and if I recall correctly, basically what happened was it was quiet, there wasn't much going on, and then boom,
So
Mortal Kombat 9.
actually, 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 let me stop you there because what happened was that there was a giant fighting game crash that happened in that time period. Like Mortal Kombat during the PlayStation 2 era was actually keeping fighting games kind of alive because during that time frame, fighting games for whatever reason just dropped off the face of the planet. Like people stopped playing them as much. Like tournaments or stuff were still going on, but that was the heavily dedicated. Um During that time frame, Mortal Kombat was kind of keeping things alive, like kind of trying to keep the spirit alive. And the one that happened before Mortal Kombat 9 was the often panned, absolutely dreadful, and really, really sad to play Mortal Kombat versus DC.
Oh yeah, let's. Can we skip that one?
No, we cannot. We're
Oh,
in Lorecast, guys.
you're gonna make me relive it. Oh God.
So, for those who are uninitiated, Mortal Kombat versus DC was right around the time that the Mortal Kombat name and Midway was bought. The licensing and rights for it were bought by Warner Brothers. Ed Boon, being a massive fan of comic books, was drooling at the possibility of having characters inside of his game that are from comic books. And since they were with Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers owns DC. All right, let's do this. Now, one of the biggest problems that we came across when it came to Mortal Kombat and superheroes is specifically when it comes to DC, because DC characters are meant to be idolized for the most part. Their heroes particularly. Staring right at you, Superman.
Superman
And
fucked it up for everybody in that game.
and because of that, the hero characters had heroic brutalities, which were often and sometimes worse fates than fatalities. The villains had fatalities, which were often really lame. Looking at you, Joker.
But
Which
they
we'll get
finished that
into
in
with Mortal
9,
Kombat.
yeah.
Yeah, they finished it in 9 and also in 11. But but they had that, and then the mechanics were really really questionable. Like the one thing that they did that was actually kind of cool was they kept the idea of the stage transitions from the older games. So they like allowed you in order to go into different parts of the arena, but you had button tapping mini games in order to be able to go from one side to the other, which the AI was ruthless about. And then there was Dark Side Khan. Darkside Khan is easily, to me at least, was one of the worst and most frustrating enemies slash boss characters of the 3D era because they were still in the 3D era during this. So it was it was not a great game. Also, if you want to laugh, just go and look up Wonder Woman's special moves and see her a posing in a standing spin.
That game, I was not a fan of it. They did
No.
an interview about it, and they said basically the DC wasn't down with seeing Superman getting his head
Mm-hmm.
ripped off and you can see his spine. So it was really, really, really kneecapped. And then, but as mentioned a little bit before, they kind of went in because the Joker fatality was interesting because it was only like half of it. So like, they went in later, and one of the characters in nine they made him like,
Sing soon.
yeah, turned into a clown. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't he wasn't the Joker. He was just a clown, and he finished that fatality. And then I guess Mortal Kombat 11 also because Joker's in Mortal Kombat 11. So
Yeah. So what happened in that case? Like certain regions had that area had that blocked off. But if you had a modified version of the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, or Xbox 3, PlayStation 3 or 360, excuse me, PlayStation 3 or 360, then you could actually force the camera to pull back out or change some of the scripting in it in order to be able to see what the fatality was supposed to actually be. And it was just a headshot. That's all it was. It wasn't anything impressive. No explosion or anything because all of the fatalities in that game were nerfed.
yeah, straight up nerfed.
So then after a couple years of that, and the fans were like at their lowest point, suddenly on high, Ed Boon walks upon the masses, floating, halo behind him, holding out a copy of what we now know as one of the best games in the franchise that brought new elements and new moves and new attacks and new characters to the masses. Mortal Kombat 9. Or just known as Mortal Kombat during its time. So, Mortal Kombat 9 was part of the rebirth of fighting games. Mortal Kombat 9 was actually really important, as well as Street Fighter 4, because these two always tend to happen in tandem. Where in which both of these were responsible for the return of the fighting booms. Mortal Kombat was the return of fighting booms in the West. Not to mention, it brought us easily one of the best competitors of fighting games ever to exist, also known as Sonic Fox. But and also he was, let me put it this way, he was young enough at this point. He was young enough where in which they had to turn the blood off in order for him to compete because of his age. But moving back, so Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat both came out around about the same time. Street Fighter had a little bit of a lead on it by like a year, but it was still responsible for restarting the fighting game boom. And as for such, fatalities, we had some of the more brutal ones that we've seen in quite some time for fatalities, especially after Mortal Kombat versus DC. We had X-ray attacks, where in which those were attacks that you use super meter for, which was a new mechanic, in it in order to be able to basically have a comeback mechanic. If you were low in the fight or if you were trying to finish off a really, really impressive looking combo, you could end up doing one of those and it would end up cracking your opponent's skull or doing things like that. And you would actually see the x rays and bones breaking. Now that's a mechanic that ends up moving forward through some of the other games as well. But most important part is that this game also brought in EX moves. This was an evolution for the franchise as a whole because it brought in things that the other games did not have. And and people decried a little bit of it because it seemed a little bit more like Street Fighter by having those super moves that you could end up doing extra things for. But it was honestly the step that was necessary in order to make a newer, more fulfilling experience for Mortal Kombat that wasn't the same that you played before. And we were back fully to 2.5D. So we had the ability in order to see characters fully rendered in 3D and have the camera move and do different things, but still exist on that 2D fighting plane that you knew and loved from Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3.
It was a wonderful game. It also introduced bringing in characters from outside of the franchise, such as Freddy Krueger, a
Mm-hmm.
tradition which has continued to this day. Mortal Kombat 10 had Alien, Jason Voorhees, and Leatherface, and 11 has Joker, Spawn, and they're still actually doing DLC for that one. So
Yeah, Joker, Spawn, RoboCop, the Terminator, and I think that's all of them in 11. In Mortal Kombat 10, basically the joke became it was the horror fighting game that Ed Boon wanted but just couldn't have. because you were able to get the big wigs. Like the only one that was missing was Freddy again, essentially, because you managed to get Jason in there, which was, huh. You managed to get Leatherface in there, who was also bottom tier and absolute ass. You were able to get Alien in there, who was top tier and insane. You were able to get Predator in there, who was mediocre, but still really, really cool add on. Like they did the only thing that they didn't really do was incorporate the characters into the voice acting, because with a lot of them they didn't really talk, so you couldn't really do a whole lot with
I
that.
really enjoy
But
the alien taunts, though. It's really cool.
yeah.
Super awesome.
I will say that the characters commenting on how ugly those characters were, and also the like Johnny Cage saying "Game over, man, game
Oh my god.
over," was like, it was honestly like they did a really good job of what they could do in order to try and emote the characters and make them work in the world that they had. And also, because Mortal Kombat is Mortal Kombat, you can just claim that portals caused everything to happen.
Yeah, of course. So, and then we have Mortal Kombat 11, which is current right now and is a great
Mm-hmm.
game and it's a lot of fun. And they introduced the Fatal Blow mechanic, which is kind of like the evolution of the X-rays.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have the Injustice games, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of take the whole idea of Mortal Kombat versus DC and kind of ramps it up a few levels and include their
Mm-hmm.
own special guests. I mean, the Ninja Turtles are in it, for example, in number two.
The So good. The ninja, and also of course because Boone couldn't stop himself. There's at least one Mortal Kombat character in each of the Injustice games, which like the reason that we're kind of bringing this up is that like Injustice is as much of a part of Mortal Kombat as Mortal Kombat is a part of Injustice. So like it's just that there are slightly different mechanics. Like Mortal Kombat having a block button, while Injustice you hold back to block, like you're more so standard fighting games like Street Fighter and things of that sort. Um, Scorpion in Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, obviously in Injustice One, who was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare to play against. Primarily because with a game that has back to block, you you can't react as quickly as you could to a teleport from behind, and that's something that in a lot of those games the game developers generally try to avoid. But Scorpion could just teleport behind you, at least when the game first came out, could teleport behind you, beat you up, and then just get free combos from there and out. They nerfed him a little bit later on, but the damage was already done. In Injustice 2, we got not one but two guests from Mortal Kombat. We got Sub-Zero from season 1, and Raiden, or Raiden depending on where you're from, for season 2 in that game. And the one benefit and the one kind of like cheap thing they ended up doing for Raiden, or Raiden. I keep saying Raiden because it's the proper pronunciation of it, but it's Mortal Kombat, so it's Raiden. The What they ended up doing was they ended up having Black Lightning as a skin for him, so it was a total character conversion. Like lines, vocals, and everything else would change if you had that skin on comparatively. And also, you had a giant electric black power fist in the background when you did his super, instead of the Mortal Kombat symbol in the background in Thunder in Lightning.
Which
So
was a
there
really
was
cool
a lot
tech.
of really
That
cool.
was a really
Yeah.
cool. When I did that combo for the first time
Mm-hmm.
in Injustice 2, I was like, whoa. That's cool. I
Yeah.
like the Batman one. The Batman one's a lot of fun. And of course the Ninja Turtle
Yeah.
stuff. But all
Mm-hmm.
right, so that's kind of the history of the games. Now back in the day, what happened was Mortal Kombat became one of the most important games in the history of gaming because it was one of the games that inspired the formation of the ESRB, the people who put the everyone or mature or whatever logo on the front of the video games, making it so your mama wouldn't buy you Mortal Kombat when you were a kid if you were a total
Mm-hmm.
loser. Because my mom bought me Mortal Kombat because she didn't care about where I was going to turn out, and look where I am now. Anyway, I'm kidding. My mom actually explained it to me. She sat down and she's like, the reason, Dev, that I let you get like parental advisory CDs and I let you get violent video games and stuff is because I believe that you were smart enough to distinguish reality from fantasy. And I have faith in you to be able to do that. And so she actually chose to place that trust in me. And
Hmm.
what, I mean, you ended up with me, which I gotta say, I don't think it was misplaced trust personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it became one of the most important games out there. The ESRB was formed as a result of it, and I believe some other games as well.
Hmm.
Games were starting to get more violent at that point. You started seeing knockoffs, and
Tattoo assassins.
tattoo
Oh
assassins. Yeah,
no.
let's
Oh
let's not talk about
god.
tattoo assassins, all right?
Uh,
But you even saw like Midway even started kind of ripping themselves off, like the Batman Forever video game was done
hmm.
like Mortal Kombat, but it was a platformer, but it was like photorealistic and like all this stuff. It was pretty bloody and gory and stuff. But I don't know. It's interesting, but definitely good games. Now, because Mortal Kombat became this phenomena, there was only really one thing that like you knew was going to happen. It had to happen. There was no question it was going to happen. A movie was going to be made. And a
Hmm.
movie was made. The movie was called Mortal Kombat. I believe it came out in late 94, 95. And it was actually, for what it was, a good movie. Like I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I love Shang Tsung, who in 11, by the way, is portrayed by the guy who played him in the movie, and he did such a
Hmm.
wonderful, your soul is mine. Like, dude, he's so good. And I loved it in Mortal Kombat 11, where spoiler alert, where he turns back young, and it looks exactly like him from Mortal Kombat 1. I was like, because he's old now, so like,
Yeah.
I mean, they like really like went in and like took care of it, and just is a class act. It's beautiful. And that guy is Shang Tsung as far as I'm concerned, and always will be.
Yeah. Hiroyuki Tagawa is the actor's name.
Thank you, because I do not want to slaughter this very, very respected human's name. So, yeah, him. Word up, Carrie. He was beautiful and just took care of business. The movie was good. It was lacking in some things though. They wanted a PG-13 rating, so the
Yeah.
violence was a bit lacking. It was very corny. But if you think about it, Mortal Kombat in general is very corny. It always has
It
been.
is. It's campy as all hell. Like there's no way to avoid it. It is a very campy franchise, and the thing is that, like, I think one of the things that Mortal Kombat 4 ended up doing was it took itself a little bit too seriously, except for the endings, because I actually had that as a clip on something. Over there. Anyway, but but in Mortal Kombat 4 and some of the other games, it took themselves a little bit too seriously. And with Mortal Kombat 9, one of the things they did was the story mode was taking itself like semi seriously, but it didn't take itself seriously enough in order for the joke not to be there. And with the other games, later on, and also the movie itself, they all like had a certain level of like, okay, we don't really need to go in this hard for it. This is supposed to be kind of fun, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with it. And Johnny, like, for example, Johnny Cage is just like a perfect example of we're shooting we're taking the piss on this.
I love, love, love. And I think it was 11, where it was his older version talking to his younger version. He's like, I solemnly swear that I will do everything in my power to hit that. He's talking about
Yeah.
Sonya. Sonya just looks at him like, she was actually in the new game. She was played by Ronda Rousey too, which was very interesting. Um,
It was, and I'm going to disparage this a little bit. Her VO was bad in the original game, but when the DLC characters started coming out, you could tell that she was getting a little bit more comfortable in the role, but it still wasn't great.
I thought she did fine. I thought she was an okay
She
Sonya.
did she did okay, but like it's just that in comparison to MK10 Sonya or even MK9 Sonya, it was like there was a dip. There was a dip.
Fair enough. So the movie happens, and it's corny and it's campy and it's fun and it's not as violent as maybe you would expect. And it gets to the end of the movie. If you haven't seen it yet, spoilers, but I don't know why you haven't. It gets to the end, they all get in a fighting pose. You see Shao Kahn's face up in the sky, and it's like, and then that theme song. Even if you haven't seen the movie, you
Mhm.
know the theme
You
song.
know it.
Mortal Kombat, dun 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 dun. Dude, okay, Technotronics, all right,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and then it kicks in. So it was a great movie. It was pretty much commercially panned. Pretty much everybody hated it. But the thing is that hindsight is always 2020, and Mortal Kombat Annihilation proved that Mortal Kombat
Whoa.
1 was basically Gone with the
Whoa.
fucking wind. Next, it was Citizen Kane next to Annihilation. And to prove this to myself,
Oh
I watched
no.
I watched a review of Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I was like, it wasn't that bad. I went back and
Oh, it
watched
was
it. It
bad.
was bad. Like
It was worse than
it,
anticipated.
and it's like, I swear
Oh.
to God, guys, if you go back and watch him, like watch Mortal Kombat 1 and then think like, okay, that was decent. And then I swear to God, you're gonna
Oof.
like Mortal Kombat 1 is going to in your mind become Jaws after you watch it. Like it's gonna become Titanic or Avatar. Like Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Ed Boon could have squatted down and took a giant and it would have made more sense and been better than Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Yeah, just Sindel's acting in
Uh,
that. Oh,
cringe.
oh,
Sindel in 11 though
oh.
was
Yes. Now keep that in mind. Non-revenant Sindel.
yeah, well,
Non-revenant Sindel.
yeah. Well, I mean, not Revenant. I mean, Revenant Sindel was all gravy too, but I love Sindel. I think it's a wonderful
Okay,
character.
okay. So since we are talking lorecast and we're actually going to go into a little bit of the lore of the games in this case, sorry for anybody who was expecting that specifically, but when we're going to if we're going to go in there, oh wow, yeah, Sindel's story arc in that franchise is dreadful, like
All of them are really.
the like depending like from going from one to the other, it is real bad. Like, all right, so first set of games. Okay, so all right, real quick. What we're going to go ahead and get into is a little bit here because we're really going to have to do a part two of this if we're going to try and get into the actual like story lore
Yeah, I think so.
because it is complex and is less complex and more just convoluted. All right, so for everybody who's not like in Mortal Kombat is a game franchise that has existed for like 20 plus for like around about 20 plus years now. It is also a game that has has multiple timelines that make some comics blush. Like the retcons, the throwbacks, the backbacks, the back downs. There's so many of them, and Sindel is probably one of the strongest ones. So, first set of games, Sindel is classified as a hero character, all the way up until 9, essentially. So, for original base timeline, Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3. She was definitely a hero. She was a hero of Adenia. She was fighting against Shao Kahn because he was kind of forcibly taken to be as his bride, and also the mother of Katana. And going into that, she also was kind of just like stuck in a position of having to fight against him because Shao Kahn killed her previous husband, King Gerard. So going from there, Deception era, she was still very much of a hero, but there was a little bit of a turn, but not a whole lot. Like they kind of went a little wishy washy on it, but she was still a hero of Adenia. Mortal Kombat 9, she had a all of a sudden unexpected heel turn and just kind of went for whatever reason. We don't know, like trying to figure out why. We don't know. She just ended up liking Shao Kahn all of a sudden and just like, oh, I'm all about this evil, I'm all about this evil peen right over here. Give me
Mm-hmm.
some of that.
That hammer though.
Just like his fatality in 11 is called back blown out for a reason, but when you go there and then hit 11, hit like 10, still evil but not really relevant to an extent. But then 11, she's just like full evil again, and it's just like look, and you had the opportunity in order to turn her back, but they decided to double down on it. So when she ended up coming back to life, spoilers to the Aftermath DLC. When she ends up coming back to life, she's still a heel. She's still evil, and it was just like the way that her character arc had existed up until then. It was just really, really, really weird that they decided to keep her on the side of the villains at that point, even when like justification wise she didn't really have a whole lot besides just trying to get back with Shao Kahn in order to throw it back.
Wasn't she trying to? Because in that timeline, Katana had overthrown Shao Kahn and became Khan. So maybe she was just she. Okay, so like it's
So
like
with the way
Cersei,
that
right?
they,
It's like Cersei. Like
yeah,
Cersei was like the queen mother or whatever, and didn't want to be. She wanted to be queen. It might be kind of that
mhm.
kind of scenario, like where she just didn't want to be relegated to, being the queen mother or whatever. She wanted to rule, like actually rule, and she knew Shao Kahn was a vehicle in order to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, so it's a little weird in that case as well because because in the timeline that Sindel was brought back, Katana hadn't made it to Khan level yet, and because of that, she wanted to like she was trying to she wasn't really usurping power. She was just trying. She just ended up betraying her for like to try and gain power back for both her and Shao Kahn. And I think that hypothetically speaking, she was going to end up going against Shao Kahn and taking him out of it sooner than later anyway. But like the attempted justifications that they had for it was really, really weak, and there was a giant plot hole just kind of there for it. There are some people who have gone into it a little bit more detail about that, but that was just like one of the biggest like, huh,
But
that doesn't make a lot of sense when I was playing it.
it did provide for one of the greatest romances in the history of Mortal Kombat, though, because I'll tell you what, when Shao Kahn turned to like there's a part in the game where you're fighting as either Sindel or Shao Kahn, you can choose. And you choose Shao Kahn. He like turns to Sindel and he says, "How many of his bones should I break for you, my love?" And I was like, "Damn!" Like Shao Kahn, like like kind of got it. All right, man. Like, can I be Sindel?
Yeah.
Like, I like that's romance, man. Like,
I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like, they had some good moments. They had some really good moments there. But I was just like, the entire time I was just like, partially yelling at the TV, just like, are you serious right now? Really? We're going here. We're doing this again. We're doing this again. We're doing this again. Okay, quick.
that's the thing
Okay,
though is Mortal
okay.
Kombat when they want to retcon something, all they got to do it's really simple for them. They've had it built in since the beginning. Basically, they're just like elder gods, lols. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's
Elder,
it.
like, and honestly, like MK11 had the biggest retcon in the existence of Chronica because she could just like, I'm just going to reform this multiple times because like in one of the sequences when it came to Raiden and Liu Kang like having their inevitable clash, which happened in Mortal Kombat 9 and just kind of like continued on from there. Because why did you pick up the Kamidogu again? Why did you pick that up again, Raiden? Why did you do that? Anyway, because they were always destined to clash because of Chronica. Once again, spoilers. Um, it was a instance and a very, very like telling sign that they have fought in infinite timelines each time, and there was that one point where in which it all came to Raiden at once. It's like, wait a minute, wait,
That was
how many times did we
that
fight?
was the craziest case of deja vu I've ever had in my life, and I'm a god.
He just like, and then like he was about to fight, and it's like, okay, let's stop. Wait, wait,
I
okay,
thought that scene was incredibly powerful though. The way they executed
yeah,
it was great. It was wonderful. For those of you who haven't played Mortal Kombat and the Aftermath DLC for 11, I strongly suggest it. And for no other reason, really, than Shang Tsung, who is just
yeah.
so
He
awesome.
oh eats the scenery in every
He
sequence, and it
does.
keeps you just watching
He's great.
because he is and he knows that he is such a bastard, and everybody knows that he's going to betray them, but it's just a matter of when. And like there are also two endings to that game depending on who you choose in the ultimate fight. I'm not going to get into that because like that's one of those ones I kind of want the people in order to like see the endings for that, and also there's like different rewards that you end up getting for like costume
I
stuff.
went back and did both.
But yeah, I'm going to have to do it again when I end up getting the Xbox One version. But yeah, so there's a lot there, and there is a lot of like context there. Like we're talking at a point where we're talking about a franchise where in which the lore has actually involved people's kids coming
Yeah.
in order to take up a little bit of the mantle while they're still around. Now, how Sonya and Johnny are still as able-bodied as they are, considering that they are old,
Damn,
but
you old.
yeah, but yeah, past that, it's an interesting instance of the games just like working, and like the you can see the evolution of the franchise just from like how the characters interact with one another and how like much lore there is behind each of those characters that we'll have to get into at some point. But really, there's so much. It's one of those ones where in which like trying to take into account all of the lore of the characters. If you're aiming for just the main characters, the main players, Scorpion, Sub Zero, Johnny, Sonya, generally the original 8 as well, then you'll have like a couple hours of just talking about like one to two of the characters each time.
It's very complex. It's a very complex franchise. But
It's no Metal Gear, but yeah.
the beauty of Mortal or Kingdom Hearts, the beauty of
Ugh.
Mortal Kombat is though that you don't have to know all this to pick up a Mortal
Mm-hmm.
Kombat game and to have fun. That's the genius. Is that like you don't have to know Raiden's entire history in order to enjoy kicking somebody's ass with electric moves. Like it's just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's the same thing with like Pokemon. There's a lot about Pokemon that's never explained, and especially the early games, you can pick them up and just have fun without knowing a lot of it.
Yeah.
So that's really a really smart decision that they've made, and but that lore is there for the fans that care about that stuff or have been around since the beginning. And the series has definitely evolved with their fans, unlike some other series, also some previously mentioned in this podcast. But
Mm-hmm.
that's all good. So I think Zach, I think that we have taken over enough of Nick's sweet time.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything you want to say about the lovely Mortal Kombat franchise in closing, or any shout outs or anything else you want to do?
When it comes to Mortal Kombat, I'll definitely say if you have not played the franchise, I would definitely say get into it a little bit. Like fighting games are an amazing thing, where in which they're just like there's a level of ridiculous. Of course, there's a learning curve, but there's a level of ridiculousness that comes with all of them, and and hopefully try to get into them. Just see if you dig it or not, and if not, you can even just play around with like the mobile games and stuff like that, because or just find an emulator to play some of the old ones on. Like there are a lot of options in order to try and get into them a little bit, and it's definitely worthwhile to play them. If not, and if gore isn't really your thing, there's always other fighting games you can get into, and they all have so many of them have so many stupid stories. Like okay, real quick, there's one franchise I could get into called Blaze Blue. We would be here all day.
I've never heard of
Literally be
it.
here all day. Yeah. But just fighting games have like ridiculous, awesome, stupid, and amazing stories. Just definitely like check out some if you don't even want to play them, just check out some videos or watch like the cutscenes and stuff on YouTube because wow.
All right. So I guess from this point, I guess we should say shout out to the whole Lorecast crew.
Yeah, definitely.
And shout out to everybody listening. We are Beetlecast. And I also, by the way, I also guest on Lorecast all the time. I'm actually a Lorecast member for the religion Lorecast. I do that with Nick. We just actually recorded a new Judaism episode last night, so that's a lot of fun. And then
Mm-hmm.
Zach is a streamer on Twitch, twitch.tv/ghostbody. If you want to get into some of his stuff, he's an expert on this stuff and so fun to watch. I love watching his stuff, and I go in and check out his streams as much as I can. We're honored to be here. We're honored to have done a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to do a follow up eventually, going into the lore of the actual games as opposed to the history of them. But we felt like the history was super important to
Yes.
go into. So, other than that, make sure you check us out. You can just find us on your favorite podcast, network. We're called Beetlecast, and this has been Beetlecast taking over Lorecast. And before I go, Nick, I only really got one thing to say to you. Bye bye.